Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Cloudbusters. I'm excited. I am in Aptio's very own studio in our London office. We were making so many videos that it just made sense to have our own space. So hopefully everyone appreciates the beauty lighting and this fancy podcaster microphone. And I am thrilled to welcome Simon Davis as my guest today. Now, we will be talking today about shared cloud costs and how do you show those out to teams in a way that makes sense, in a way that helps them understand what their full cloud bill is. Now, this is near and dear to every enterprise's heart because there are all sorts of shared cloud costs out there. Now, some of them are in your cloud bill. If you look at the invoice or your detailed billing reports and files, you'll see things like premium support, for example. But it doesn't stop there. You also will have shared costs that are third-party tools and software that help you with your cloud. You might have licensing costs. There might be some sort of internal cross-charging for shared services. So everyone has this challenge. Now, the trick is how do you make it clear what those shared costs are, why each team is being charged a certain amount. Now, in a FinOps model, we talk about the importance of providing real-time cost visibility to teams. We talk about the importance of communicating what you're being charged and why. And Simon has created an amazing system at EDF that allows that visibility out to teams for their shared costs. So Simon's going to tell us today how he managed to allocate 100% of the shared costs back out to the business. He's going to tell us a little bit more about how he did it. Simon, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you. It's been great to be invited, so thank you.
Well, it's been a good journey as well. I know you've been with EDF for years, and you've really made progress by leaps and bounds on this particular challenge. So first, let's start with what at EDF is considered a shared cost. Can you give us some examples of that?
Yeah, I mean, this is an interesting question. In the old ways of doing things, like on-prem, there were costs like capex investment, CPU activation costs, air conditioning, etc., which were all wrapped up as a corporate recharge and were shared in a way which was difficult to give clarity or transparency. Now, in the cloud, there are still shared costs, and as we have evolved through our understanding, we have been able to identify these. For example, as you say, premium support is a shared cost, which is used by anyone using the cloud to build their infrastructure, but we also identify infrastructure as a minimum viable product. So what is needed as a minimum to run the rest of the accounts in our cloud? This is what we call our base service or our shared service or below the waterline costs. Another example is support costs, so from third parties or shared services or applications where several business units run services through the same infrastructure or accounts. And all of these we articulate as a shared cloud cost, which we also call indirect costs.
So you've given great examples of what is shared. Now talk to us about how you share it out, right? If we all benefit, then we all have to pay. How do you determine who pays what?
Yeah, I mean, we did struggle with this question. When we first looked at it, we thought about applying those costs at business unit level or wrap them up to the highest level of recharge or another corporate recharge somehow, but this did not give us the clarity our business units wanted or needed. It would also mean doing it this way, a level of transparency was lost and would cause the same issues as we've seen before in on-premise infrastructure. So whereby the same question would still exist, which is what is included in the shared costs. We decided to allocate as many of the known shared costs as possible to all of our accounts using the service proportionally, depending on monthly direct usage. This way, we can answer one of the key questions from our business units. If we turn off an application or a service, what is the cost benefit to our business? Or now the business can compare any current application cost and go to the market to compare other products to see if there is a clear business value in changing or replacing products, and what does that investment look like?
Yep. And that is something you can explain. Well, you've used, X dollars in cloud, X pounds. And so you're responsible for X percent of these shared costs, right? It's easy to explain, it's easy to
Hmm.
understand. I'm sure there were still debates about that, but also you have a clear explanation you can start with. Now, let's do a little before and after. I remember back in the day, you had a very manual process for this. So let's first look at what were you doing? How did you do that before? And then we'll talk about what you're doing now and how you've managed to automate it.
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. It was a very, very manual process, and when we were at the crawl stage of FinOps, we would run reports based on tags and download these CSV files. And we found out very quickly this would only get us so far in the recharge process, as the data in the tags would have missing data or expensive products we found couldn't be tagged. This would create an issue prior to our monthly recharge, as we had to assimilate the information we had and try and create a recharge which was transparent but also defensible. The spreadsheet method was very manual, as we've said, and had several layers, from downloading the separate business unit costs, cleaning or grouping applications or services based on tags available, and then layering shared costs to these services manually. It was, and it still is, a very time critical piece of work at the start of every month. And we realized very quickly this was not scalable. Mistakes could easily be made, which created a lot of rework. But there was a bigger issue in that once an error was discovered by any of our business units, it was difficult to then defend the recharge position, because the perception was that all the recharge was based on false metadata. And we had many difficult conversations in relation to monthly recharge.
Yep. Yep. Exactly. That's two different issues. It's manual, it takes time. And then if people don't trust the numbers anyway, it's sort of like, well, what are we doing here?
Absolutely.
So you did something about it, right? Now let's talk about what you're doing now. It's much more programmatic. It's much easier to understand and accurate. Walk us through what you're doing today.
Yeah, so we have absolutely. At the end of last year, I started to look at the relationships between costs and products and services, and the links between services, business units, and cost centers. And I already knew that costs sat in several categories, whether it's direct costs, indirect costs, shared or not shared, layered cost, tax, marketplace, and credits. And I looked at how EDF could leverage the investment it made within Aptio's Cloudability. I also knew that every line in the bill had a unique identifier, and we'd already been using the business mappings functionality in Cloudability, and this was great to a point. And but it was leaving behind some issues, not being able to really see into the data to then have the really robust conversations with the users of the cloud that was needed, and it still is needed. I created a simple plan to understand how to group this data, and it's a bit like a geological survey site. So, or a site survey, you have a very coarse sieve which catches the big rocks, and then you use the less coarse sieve to catch the smaller rocks, and so on. And so you have the business mapping catching the biggest data based on the metrics defined by the majority of the account names. And then you have the service defined by the majority of the tagged products. And then you have the resource IDs catching or mopping up the smaller unknowns. And this trickles from a top-down hierarchy. We then enlisted some help from our technical teams with the support of Aptio's Simon Conway and our TCS engineers to turn my spreadsheet analysis into code using JSON format, which is kept in GitHub as a repository with several CSV files loaded with all the statements needed to sort our data. And we have created an API link with the Cloudability tool to push any changes once a month into the Cloudability prior to the recharge billing cycle. And this has enabled us to be able to cleanse our data to a set of rules defined by us, which is defensible and transparent to our business units, ready for the FinOps discussions on what make up their costs or these costs. And it has given us the ability to show back this data to our finance business partners so they can review and change or update any of the tags prior to recharge. So it's less likely to be rejected, become stranded, or even become an exception.
Yeah, I love this because I love that analogy of the big rocks, medium rocks, the small pebbles, because a lot of the cost is fairly clear. It's a direct cost for this team or this application. So we don't need to solve that. That's relatively easy to solve. It's all these little things, these things we did not tag, or maybe something that can't be tagged that needs to be flagged as, oh, this cannot be tagged. We need to find a different way to allocate it properly. And it allows you to mop that up, right? And just go, okay, now let's solve these little last bits and pieces, but still do it in a way that is transparent and allows us to have these healthy discussions. So let's pretend this is a big stretch. Let's pretend I'm a techie. Let's pretend I'm a tech person. What do I actually get to see at the end of the month?
Okay, so yeah, so I work with the senior leadership team here at EDF and DevOps and all of the finance business partners. And because we're moving towards the FinOps methodology, anyone who has an interest can see cloud costs they are interested in. But at an engineering level, and because our starting position or our starting point is service cost or application cost, technical teams can see the cost for the products they have created in the accounts they care about. But we have also utilized Aptio's cost transparency tool to give a clear understanding of the shared costs of the cloud. It's Cloudability, which shows the raw infrastructure costs of the compute databases or storage or whatever products you may have an interest in. But like I've said, there are shared costs when using the cloud. And we have used the cost transparency tool in Aptio Suite to either capture or load these shared costs onto the invoice cost of an application of service or service. We have built a dashboard in cost transparency where any user can filter on service or application for any given month, with the caveat that the current month may not have the shared invoice cost showing because of invoice timing issues, but a user can see the current month's shared costs we are laying at enterprise IT.
Yeah. So I as a techie, I see my direct costs, but I also know I'm going to get a bill, right? And if I want to explore, well, what's in that bill above and beyond my stuff, I can just go and click and do some filtering and say, oh, okay, that's what this is.
Absolutely.
I
Exactly
love
that.
it. That's a core FinOps principle, well, a couple of core FinOps principles. So teams need to collaborate. You've created a mechanism that is easier for that collaboration. And then the FinOps reports, they need to be accessible and timely. So as soon as you have the data from last month, you're processing it, and then it's accessible, it's open to all. Now, I, as a tech person, might only care about my slice, but it's accessible. And if I wanted to compare myself with other teams, I can do that and start benchmarking. I love it. Talk to us about how this helped advance tech or your cloud development and cloud maturity across EDF.
We certainly have been on a maturity journey, which has followed the FinOps crawl, walk, run methodology. As we have matured, our controls relative to our scale have also transformed. The practices used on day one have been tuned, added to, and changed to make it more transparent. Before this transformation, we needed to understand our costs, as we needed to be able to give a great service and be transparent for all our business units. We now have the ability to answer questions on what makes up the share of my bill and why. We can now also make better business and commercial recommendations to our senior leadership team and our users of the cloud. We are now actively taking part in commercial negotiations on spend in the cloud to reduce on-demand costs. Our communication pathways are now set up and will only get better over time. And the data is readily available at any level of the business. Rework is now minimal. Updates to our accounts or services are simple, documented, and quick to implement. We can also see anomalies in data which are outside of normal operation through FinOps reporting, which is invaluable to the ever-changing landscape of the costs as we adjust to the frantic pace of change as our business adapts to challenging market conditions.
To be increasingly an interesting time for energy, right? For better and for worse in some cases. But what it allows you to do, Simon, is you don't have to be the human translator anymore. you don't have to go around justifying the bill and potentially having an error. Instead, people can go self-serve, see the bill, and now they're asking you more insightful questions, right? Hey, I noticed we're being charged for this, I don't know, performance monitoring tool that we don't actually use. I'd love to use that, right? How do I use the thing that I'm paying for? Things like that, which like all of that allows you to level up that conversation and really advance the maturity. So final question then, where are you headed next? Having cracked this particular nut, what are you focused next on your cloud journey?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. As I've said, we've been on a journey through transparency and understanding of our costs and understanding our shared costs and creating a fair way to share these costs with our business units. I'm sure many FinOps practitioners will agree this area never really completes, and you just keep refining the process and adding new ones as needed. There is still work to do. We have some shared services which need to be understood, analysed, communicated, and then shared to our users, and this will happen throughout this year and subsequent years. But we have a plan to grow the area of FinOps within TBM, which will build on the successes of recent months and past years. With the data we can now see, we can start to have some serious conversations about costs being incurred in all areas of the business, and what we can do to create better value to our cloud users. As EDF Energy grows into the cloud, we will be looking to trend costs and offer a clear TCO picture, enabling users to plan and budget their MTPs accordingly. And we will continue to build on the successes we've seen in this area. FinOps is where we see more success or successes being created to enable us to make those key critical commercial decisions and partnerships to drive the best value for EDF through the investments we are making in the cloud. But it's really exciting, or really is exciting and interesting times here at EDF.
Well, the value, like that's it. That's the word, right? Is you're here to ultimately serve a critical function across the communities that leverage you. And so how can you get the most possible value for your customers, right? And part of that is making sure that there is a clear business value for every dollar spent in cloud.
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, Simon, fantastic example of how you can really take something manual and make it automated, but still being clear and transparent and compassionate towards teams who are adopting cloud and might be new to this way of being charged. So I hope that helps folks out there who are solving similar questions. And I hope that they take inspiration from what you've managed to do with EDF.
Yeah, perfect. Again, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity in the forum to be able to discuss this. I think it's a really important message to get out there. Yeah, it would be great to talk to anyone who would want to have that knowledge or understanding.
Yep, absolutely. So folks, if you do want to get in touch or have any questions, of course, we have a LinkedIn group that you can become a member of. You can also directly message me at cloudbusters@aptio.com. We would love to have you on for a future video to solve similar problems. Simon, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing that. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll see you on a future episode.